So this is our last station, Jesus in the tomb. We adore you, O Christ, and we bless you.
Because by your holy cross you have redeemed the world.
Our reading is from John's Gospel, the 19th chapter, beginning at the 38th verse. After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, though a secret one because of his fear of the Jews, asked Pilate to let him take away the body of Jesus. Pilate gave him permission, so he came and removed his body. Nicodemus, who had at first come to Jesus by night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, weighing about 100 pounds. They took the body of Jesus and wrapped it with the spices in a linen cloth, according to the burial customs of the Jews. Now there was a garden in the place where he was crucified, and in the garden there was a new tomb in which no one had ever been laid. And so, because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. So we welcome Heather Heroldt, who has done this amazing piece of tamari, Japanese tamari, and she's going to tell us a little bit about that. But first I wanted to say that Heather has been at St. Barnabas about 7 or 8 years.
Did you ask Katie?
I looked it up on the database.
Okay, good.
And she has been a fabric artist for 25 years.
Fiber artist, yeah.
Fiber artist. A fiber artist for 25 years. And she learned to do this tamari process about 10 years ago. So tell us a little bit about this.
Tamari is what's called a heritage craft from Japan. It's really ancient, probably around 400 AD. There are regional variations. It's said that the first tamari were made by unraveling kimono and obis, expensive clothes, for the silks, and repurposing them, wrapping them into balls, which were actually made as toys for children. And then the various regions developed their own distinctive styles and patterns. Today, all of the regions of Japan have their own styles that are considered protected heritage crafts. With tamari, they have a national association of which I'm a member. I started out playing. I've been a fiber artist for a very long time. It feels like, much like fabric, you sort of delve into yarn and it just kind of goes crazy. You know, my husband, he said, "Oh, I really want to buy you a loom to have here," because when I came out west, I left all my looms and donated them back in Virginia. But Todd really wanted me to have another loom, and I said, "I don't think you understand what's going to happen when a loom comes in the house. There's going to be yarn hanging from all the ceilings." So I do still spin and weave. That was what I started doing. I tend to specialize in ancient weaving styles and materials, small wares. I'm very interested in how things are made, so I'm always very interested in the sheep to shawl process, as they would call it today. As a weaver, the first thing that attracted me to tamari is it's just so much faster than weaving, which can be, I had a teacher that told me, if you don't love how long it takes to make your design and dress the loom, which takes far more time than the actual weaving, then you're in the wrong trade. And that one, and it's good to make mistakes because then you learn how to fix them. Tamari, to me, from my point of view, was a much faster process, a much more immediate payoff. The creation of the base Mari, and I've given Erica some, she's passing some around. There are some plain ones that are not marked. What you do is you create a base Mari. I like mine to make noise, so if you shake them, Mari means ball, and ta means hand, tamari, it's a hand ball. If you give them a shake, I like mine to make noise, so most of mine I can hear beans. So there's beans and lentils. I do bells sometimes. And then you create a stitching surface by wrapping in a finer thread, and then you divide the surface with markings, and then you embroider in that marking. And there's the main thing you learn when you're beginning your certification process is the different divisions and how to keep dividing and keep dividing. It's I don't know how to say it. One of my best friends who does Tamari is actually a mathematician, and what brought her to it was the notion of spherical geometry and being able to represent that in fiber herself. I personally am all about color and texture, pattern, line. The fiber itself, creating the fiber, which holds everything together,
Heather,
basically.
can you tell us a little bit about why you chose this form, this medium, to do Jesus in the tomb?
Over the years, as I have worked with weaving and later with Tamari, a lot of the patterns and divisions become very symbolic and meaningful to me. This particular marking, which is called a combination 10, which results in 12 faces. There's a green ball floating around with some black pins sticking in it, that one right there. The pins mark the 12 centers around the ball, which radiate from the center of the ball. As I engaged with Scripture in Tays, my own experience in Tays, for me, following Jesus, marking his journey, was very analogous to the process I go through in the creation of a tamari. This particular tamari is very oversized. The ones that are passed around are much more typical, 3 to 4 inches is what's much more typical. But I wanted to give myself a larger canvas to have something that would be more visible, so I just kept going when I was wrapping the yarn. This one in particular is very much line art, and it's a geometric trick, basically. This pattern is made with triangles, and you just do diminishing triangles, smaller and smaller. And then the one next to it is opposite, and so you stitch those triangles going the other direction. And so I went first one way, and then the other way, then the other, all over the surface of the ball for all 12 faces, 120 little triangles, which each have 5 diminishing triangles inside of them. When you do it opposite like that, it gives the effect that I thought looked like flowers, and I was really struck by how for the station that I chose, it was important to me that they specified that it was a garden where he was, and so I wanted there to be a garden effect. I will say I had a totally different idea when I first started doing this, which was to do another cool thing, to wrap with bands that all interweave and make like a basket weave effect, and it just was not coming out how I hoped. And so, unlike the new tomb that Jesus is laid in, I just wrapped over the work and created a new design. So there is actually another pattern inside this one.
I love how you wrote in your artist statement about the search for Jesus, that when he's in the tomb, at least we know where he is for a little bit of time, as the rest of our lives where we're going this way and that, and here we are, all of the different paths surrounding and seeking Jesus. And I hear that there is something inside of this bell too. I mean,
Yeah.
I gave it away. In this ball too.
There is, inside this tamari, there is actually a bell, which is wired into a hollow space. But the joke on me is there's 3 full skeins of yarn, hand-spun yarn that I did wool, that is wound around this core. And so it's buried too deep inside, so it's not, you can't really hear it. If it's very quiet and you stand there and then you shake the ball really hard next to your head, you can sort of hear this little rattle that's not very bell-like. But there is a bell in there, and if you sit with it, it will come to you, so.
Well, I just have to, before we go to questions, say my little interpretation of this, which when I told Heather, she's like, yeah, you could maybe see that. But I love that she chose a toy, because this is traditionally a toy.
Yes.
And for me, it holds that promise of the resurrection within the tomb. And just as Mariella was talking about tensions that we find on the cross, there's also that tension in the tomb, that life and playfulness and new life and surprise are waiting for us there. So I really appreciated that. So are there questions that you would like to ask Heather?
How does she maintain her sanity?
How does she maintain her sanity when she is stitching?
This one, I really took my time. There's a little wooden ring that the Mari sits on, and I sit in a nice comfortable chair where I'm all supported, and I just take my time. It's as the pattern comes together, you know, as you're filling in the triangles, I worked one face at a time, and it just was, people would come in and see me in my studio and say, oh, when is this one going to connect with these other ones? You can see the pieces fit together. You see the pattern start to form, and as that continues to grow, it just becomes more and more exciting.
Hi.
I think we have a question back here.
Okay. I feel like Madonna. Okay. In addition to sacred geometry, and I know this is in regards to entombment, but I can't help seeing the resurrection with palm frond veins sort of going through it as well.
Yeah.
That's more a comment.
We had a couple more questions back this way.
Heather, I find it just totally unbelievable that you can't see a beginning or an end with your threads. I mean, that is unbelievable to me. And not that I was looking hard for it, but I mean, when you rotate the ball around and so forth, there is no beginning or end. Now, did I miss something? What do you use for your shape? I mean, what material is it? For a ball, I mean.
So the bell is actually wired in water bottle caps, which creates this little mini barrel shape. But I don't know what you would call it. Physics dictates that if you're winding a thread around any shape, it could be a cube, the more you go, so long as you keep moving the shape and rotating, God loves a sphere. That's what makes the planets, right? So you just keep going.
So it's
And
all thread? Those little
It's all
balls that
thread,
are
it's
pin-
all yarn. So the
Wow.
base, so around that, I've done wool yarn, hand-spun wool yarn, 3 skeins, and then there is a layer of sewing thread in the blues, and I like to combine multiple colors. It gives it a little more depth when you look at it up close. And then I sort of drop threads so that the surface becomes finer and finer to give you a good stitching surface. Over that, I don't even know if you can see it. you can't really see it in the picture. If you get a chance to look at it more closely, I did my marking in a very fine silver thread that's almost invisible. And then I just did the surface stitching in the cotton pearl. The color is called stone. I
That's
thought that was kind of
beautiful.
cool.
Sarah had a question.
Oh, okay.
I was just curious what kind of a needle you use. It seems like it'd have to be kind of long.
Tamari needles typically are longer. For this one, Aisan, my teacher, sent me one from Japan that was a little longer than what we even normally use here. It was about 5 inches long. Tamari needles are made to be very brittle, and the eye of the needle can't be bigger than the diameter of the needle. So, like you have a darning needle that has a big hole in it for sticking the yarn in. Tamari needles are made to be of consistent width, even down through the eye, and then they're not sharps like a sewing needle. They're a little sharper than like an embroidery needle would, like a tapestry needle, a little sharper than a tapestry needle would be here.
Hi, Heather.
Hi,
Hi.
Nancy.
Well, I can't express what a witness to love this is. I've always felt that one of the most stable things is the grid. And this is like a spherical grid. It's sort of like you mentioned, the planets. It's like the universe inside out. And I really, really am touched by this. And the tomb, I think this imagery for the tomb is just so incredibly original and steeped in love. I thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think on that, well, one more question.
Hi, Heather. I'm really emotional about this because from all the research I've done into sacred geometry, this is the geometry of the heart that's deep inside of us, that's eternal. So when we die, all of our life experience eventually gets assimilated into this matrix. And you've connected it to Jesus being put in the tomb. So all of his experience is being assimilated into this geometry matrix. I don't know whether you were conscious of that, but you hit perfectly the geometry, the moment, and the meaning, and the glory.
I spoke with Elizabeth a little bit before tonight to talk about when Erica sent me the list of the stations, and she was like, okay, we want to see something from you, and which was totally fine. And as I shared with Elizabeth, I really struggle with the stations personally. In fact, I think I even said Palm Sunday is, I have a real dislike for the story of Palm Sunday, of having it be made real to me that we are, to this day, participants in the story of Jesus and his experience. And so when I got to the final station, I thought, that's it, and I want to do a tamari that contains him, something I can never do, something that contains him, that holds him in a place that I can identify, but that is constantly moving and constantly shifts and revolves. And so I didn't spend a lot of time on sacred geometry, but those certainly were my thoughts when I identified that this was what I wanted to do for that final station.
Wow. Wow. Heather.
Thank you.
Heather.